Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs. This is Game Chat with Tom and Lucas, and what we have for you today is very special. Our first interview of season 3. We'll get into it in a little bit, but Tom, how are you? How are we doing?
We're hyped. We're doing great. We're interviewing JT from the Beat the Machine Rebooted studio, Sanguine Studios. He's the lead developer on this game, and it is a wonderfully fun game. Recently got into it, found out about it by meeting a good friend of his who apparently QA tests for them named Anthony. We met at a bar playing Smash Bros. And yes, we were playing Smash Bros in a bar because arcade bars are lit. And if you don't visit them, you're missing out. But yeah, we got chatting as we were duking it out on a modded Switch with different skins in Smash Ultimate, which is wild. But it was a lot of fun. We got talking about PAX East and then about content. And I was like, hey, me and my boy Lucas create some content. And he's like, hey, my boy JT creates content, but it's a game. And I wishlisted his game on Steam, checked it out, and one thing led to another. And now we're going to interview him and learn all about Sanguine Studios, Beat the Machine Rebooted, and in the inside process of developing an indie game from start to finish, if you will. You know, you getting excited?
I'm very excited. I think we should get into it. Let's bring him on.
All right. You know, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're just going to jump straight into it. We hope you enjoy, and then we'll see you after this interview. Enjoy. What up, Internet? How we doing, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy Tom back here with my favorite co-host, Lucas, and our wonderful guest today, JT from Sanguine Studios, the wonderful developers of the game Beat the Machine Rebooted, which is what we will be discussing today here with JT. JT, thank you for coming. Nice to see you this morning.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. Why don't you give us a little TLDR of what got you into video game development and sort of what kind of brought about the idea for this game?
All right. So my name is JT Frangiosa. I ended up going to college for interactive media, specifically with like a focus on game development. My ideas for wanting to start and create a video game start as early as like 5 or 6 years old. Funny enough, I actually have the first book behind me of, you know, making an add-on for the first Sly Cooper game when I was that young.
Oh, no way.
So that's kind of where everything started. You know, I was playing video games throughout high school, took a couple of programming classes, fell in love with programming. And I was like, you know what, I want to do this and create video games. And when I went to college, one of my first assignments was, you know, you had to create a 1-page game design document, which is basically, you know, just this 1 page that basically just tells people like what you want your game to be about. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just threw this, you know, arcade shooter down that had a skill tree. And I was like, you know, quick little project, I thought nothing of it, moved on. Submitted it, you know, got an A on it, whatever. It wasn't anything difficult. Took maybe, you know, 2 hours to write down. What would turn out a year later, I would have to kind of go back and advance that 1-page document. I'm like, wait, I didn't even like plan for this. What am I going to do? So that's kind of how Beat the Machine started, was this 1-page document that ended up turning into a 10-page document. Oh. And then eventually I would apply for it to be this, like, it was called a greenlit studio at my college. And we applied for it and we ended up getting one of the positions. I think we were one of 4 studios they picked. Might be wrong on that, could be 3. But essentially we were able to make the game a reality, and we kind of made like an alpha. We released it on Steam. It wasn't super polished the first time around. We kind of were doing it as a college project to make sure that like, hey, we knew what we were doing. So we kind of just left it there at the end of like 2020. And then we were like, you know what, let's go back and like make this super polished. Like, let's actually like go back, like let's be like more of a formal business now. Ended up getting, you know, actual business license. And we went back and we were like, let's, you know, reboot the game, quite literally. Like, let's do everything right this time. Like, let's do it as if we were, you know, maybe not a AAA, but let's do it as if we were our own indie company. So we went back, pretty much redid everything from the ground up, you know, minus like, you know, individual like floor tiles. And
true.
that's kind of how Beat the Machine Rebooted came alive. So if anybody's wondering why the Rebooted's there, it's because it originally started as a college project, and we were like, we're going to turn it into a real indie game now.
Okay, that's actually awesome, because we were wondering specifically about the Rebooted, and we had that as one of the questions for you.
Okay.
So that's actually pretty cool that you were able to take it from like a class project all the way to like a full-fledged product that's out there now.
Yeah.
To someone who's like unfamiliar, how would you describe Beat the Machine?
So Beat the Machine Rebooted is a top-down arcade shooter. It is definitely preferred that, you know, twin stick controls. The game plays a lot better with controller. Although most of our player base is keyboard and mouse players, so, you know, no hate to them. But essentially, we are a top-down shooter, which you get fully customizable skill tree. So you basically get to choose your way to play as you're basically creating as you're killing these little, we call them nodes, essentially, but they're enemies that all have like one unique firing type. So there's the shell node, which basically just tries to kamikaze into you. There's the speed node, which just shoots bullets from far away. You have the pulsating node, which sort of creates like these pulses of like an AoE attack. But every enemy has like one specific task. And essentially what you're doing is you're trying to kill this big boss Tom, who is invading your sector, and is it actually stands for totally overpowered machine. But essentially he's trying to take over the sector. He wants complete control of the universe. So the only way to stop him is by taking out all these little enemies, because he's afraid to fight you himself. And then eventually you actually do fight him. And he kind of does a little bit of everything.
I did not get that far yet to fight the totally overpowered machine, although I was playing on the nightmare difficulty, which congrats. That it is tough. It is for sure tough. I was going through and could only really get through 3 or 4 levels with it, particularly I think they were the carrier nodes that carried the 4 little basic homing nodes. Those would you would toss in a couple of those at a time, and those would really get to me for sure.
Oh yeah. And specifically with nightmare mode, for people that think like, you know, nightmare mode is not a challenge, just to let everybody here know, we've only had 2 players beat nightmare mode successfully. One of them is me. So nightmare mode is really difficult. It's insane, to the point where if you don't know what skills you're using, it's probably impossible. You really need to know the game like really well. I definitely would suggest swapping over to advanced mode first.
Yes,
just so you can familiarize yourself with the skills a little more. Yeah, nightmare mode is really a nightmare.
Oh yeah, I had to learn real quick that the skills I was going for with rate of fire instead of probably health would have been the smart way to go to start off. But you know, I look forward to jumping back in and continuing to try to progress through that. But advanced might be the way to go to start. Speaking of the enemy types and the nodes, even the sectors and the set design you kind of have behind it, it gives me a very like 80s arcade vibe. I can only imagine you took some inspiration from those classic arcade shooters like, you know, Galaga or Space Invaders or something like that. So what kind of inspired you to like make this start with this design doc way back in college, but what kind of gave you the idea for this sort of game?
So I actually grew up with a Sega Genesis with my dad. So when we were playing video games when I was a kid, I had a Sega Genesis and I had a PlayStation 1. So all of my inspiration came from like the really sort of old school games. And funny enough, I wanted the game to kind of look and feel like Vector Man, but if it came out in 2020.
Yes.
So I was like, how can we sort of do that? And we had kind of pulled out like documents from like all over, like all different places. So we would basically take screenshots of every top-down shooter, and we like have them all in like this big like PowerPoint. There was we took Spyro the Dragon when you did the Sparks levels in Year of the Dragon. We took Sly Cooper's Hackathon from both the new versions and the old versions. What else did we take for inspiration? We took Resogun that came out on PlayStation 3, was definitely some inspiration. We found that out kind of like later in development. We actually didn't use that one right away. And then there was, I think we used a little bit of Borderlands. There was a couple spots that we were like, we really like the user interface of Borderlands. We were like, yeah, this looks really cool.
Oh, I can see that sort of with the like the health bars and armors down in the corner. Okay, yeah. I can see that.
And then there's one more that I'm totally blanking on. But there was a 5th, and it's like completely wild and out there where we used inspiration for it. It'll come to me in a moment. Old games, Sega Genesis. It'll come to me during while we're talking, but
For sure.
I'll randomly jump back. You'll hear me go, oh, that's it.
You just went down like a hit list of like the most nostalgic games I can think of for my own childhood. I grew up with PS1, N64, and a Sega Dreamcast.
Okay.
But I had it was like a weird demo disc of a ton of Sega games from the Genesis and early on, like Vector Man, Golden Axe, like those kinds of things. That's really, really cool that you took inspiration from those games, because they're all like, they can all definitely be felt when you're playing it. And I knew I had some familiarity about it. So I'm glad to hear that I wasn't just pulling that out of nowhere. You know?
One of the other things too was when we were, so I don't know if you know this or not. I don't know how new to the game you are, but the user interface has actually gone through an entire redo as well. So the original user interface was so different. It didn't even play like a sort of like sci-fi-esque user interface. The first iteration of it was sort of, it kind of reminded you of Overwatch in a way.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of it was like all white and stuff. There was like no coloring to it. And when it was done, I was like, okay, this looks good. Like it has a good look to it, but it felt too prototypey. I was like, something, it gives like this unfinished feel.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, you know what, let's actually draw inspiration from the other things we did. And then that's sort of when it kind of really became alive and the user interface was definitely more in there.
That's kind of leading into our next question that we had. Like as I'm going through the Steam page and seeing like the different updates that this game has gone through, you guys have incredibly extensive patch notes, like very detailed. I totally appreciate, because I'm super into that. I like to see like the different stages and iterations of a project as it goes about like its life cycle. But, you know, being the lead dev on this game, what are some of those challenges that you might have had going through as you went through these different iterations?
The most difficult part of everything was making sure that each option on the skill tree has usability. And when you have a skill tree that has over 5 million combinations, it's not possible to test them all. It straight up isn't. So what we had to do was we sort of had to be like, hey, we just need somebody to like literally test every individual skill by itself on the second world. So that is Toxic Drive. So if you go to Toxic Drive, it is possible. Unfortunately, you can't do it in the real game. But what we did was we ran through Toxic Drive with just one skill on. So every active was just by itself. And if you couldn't beat that level with the ability, we knew that there was something wrong with the balance, because that should basically be the equivalent. So if an ability did level 2 too fast, that's how we knew that it was possibly overpowered. So we kind of went through there and we were like, all right, let's test every single skill on Toxic Drive. Just one of them. So you can't stack anything together, no stats, just to see if it would work. There was a couple of abilities that we did get rid of in the long run. We actually ended up getting rid of a fan favorite ability. It was called Hull Mending. The ability was extremely overpowered. There was no way to balance it. It actually released into the live game. It was just something that we didn't realize would be this overpowered. It was a 140-second cooldown, and when you would activate it, you would regenerate 75% of your maximum health over 4 seconds.
Oh my God.
So we really didn't expect it to go anywhere, because we were like, okay, for an active that just gives you health back, a lot of the other actives, they, block a projectile. They're, dealing damage to enemies around you, giving you a massive shield that explodes, creating a wall that's a barrier. Hull Mending was just straight up, you got an additional health bar. We didn't think anything of it. The problem was that people were just waiting before they would enter rooms with Hull Mending. They were just kind of like sitting there waiting for the cooldown to go down. And they were essentially just, pausing the game to essentially just let without physically pausing it. They were just kept letting it sit there. And then that's how they were beating levels. And I'm like, that doesn't feel right at all, like for the player or for us. So we were like, let's get rid of this ability and let's make the vitality tree stronger, because there's no way that we should just want players to just like sitting outside of rooms. And they don't want to do that either. And people felt almost forced that they had to take this skill to win on vitality. We were like, no, something's wrong here. Like, no way should that be a thing. So Hull Mending has been removed. It will never come back. So anybody hoping for Hull Mending to return, it's not coming back. What else? I think over time we got rid of an ability called Phaser Laser, which essentially was, if anybody here has played with Cooling Cell, basically the same thing, except that it does damage rather than lowers your cooldowns. That's essentially what it did. But we just got rid of it because we felt it was a little stale. It was just kind of boring. We felt that there was ways to make the power tree better. When it comes to skills, there's definitely open holes that are still in Beat the Machine. There's definitely still spots where like, hey, maybe this skill could be, be nice to have an extra skill that does crit damage. It'd be nice to have a skill that maybe grants me armor and rate of fire, because that combo doesn't really exist other than XV9 bot. So there's always new areas to explore too. But yeah, the skill tree has kind of been that really difficult thing to test, and it's sort of always been in our way of, hey, if we decide to, buff or nerf something, especially in like the competitive scenes nowadays, because, Beat the Machine in a weird way is strangely competitive. You can definitely see that game being speed run and different skill trees kind of, affecting the pace of play. We have to be very careful, like even throwing 2 to 5% on a number could theoretically change every, build that people are running. So
absolutely, it's those little balance tweaks, that'll really like shake it up for the game. And with that being your main kind of focus of, like, not gimmick is a bad word, but your main draw, if you will, I can imagine how having that many abilities would really like cause a lot of back and forth between you and your team as you're going about it.
Oh yeah, I would say that the most difficult part for us is when we get to durations, because
for the abilities.
Yeah. So like, for instance, a lot of our skills, we have built in the animation for it. So if, let's say you're using Cooling Cell is designed to be like a 0.75 second animation. If we wanted to make it longer so that you could technically hit more enemies, it would actually take us a lot of time to do that. So if we ever needed to like extend the range of a spell, it's not just as easy as just, let's just scale it up. It's not like that. It could be, a 6-hour process just to do that. So if there's an ability that maybe doesn't last long enough or needs to have more range, we have to be very careful with that. So that's something that also like we have to put more time and more testing into.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty cool too. Like, those are the interesting things we want to sort of dive into next as we progress through the interview, sort of the behind the scenes that really makes the game what it is and makes the finished project. That I feel is very insightful, just because people don't tend to think about those things when they look at a video game. They don't really see like you said, the 6 hours that could go into potentially just extending an ability by 2 seconds because you have to animate all those frames. Like, as someone who did some animation in college and whatnot, like, that alone is a very painstaking process. That opportunity cost must come into play quite a lot too. Like, oh, hey, do we really have the time to focus on this? Like, is this little tweak we're going to do like that much more important? How much will it actually benefit the finished project?
Every little thing comes to some sort of decision making.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And there's stuff that, we've come up with that we're like, yeah, let's not make it into the game. I'm not going to spoil too much on that end because, I will not say that it may not come to the game in the future. So I'm going to hold off on that one. So, but yeah, there have been some skills specifically that we've held off from due to how long it could take to create.
In the kind of build up to this interview, you mentioned showing the game off at a convention.
Yeah.
And so we were just wondering, what was that like? Because we went to PAX, which is, not as creators, like we weren't really showing a game off. So what was that like for you? And any challenges or, difficulties in being a developer there?
So we have all gone to conventions before, my team, as people who have, wanted to view other people's booths. We've never run a booth before. So we didn't really know what to expect. And then as well, we wanted to make sure that we were going to a smaller convention. We didn't want to go to this super large convention and get overwhelmed. And then we're like, oh, what do we do now? Like, we didn't want that. So we went to this smaller convention. So it was called Zolocon. It's located at the Fugue in Warminster, Pennsylvania. And essentially it's this big circular arena where they did testing for NASA. So that's kind of the historic part about this building. So the event was around 2,500 people, so really small convention center. But it's a really just cool place. You're there for the history of it. You're there for, the kind of small knit community that kind of goes there every 6 months for these conventions. And even more so, there's all different things going on there every weekend. So if it's not a video game convention, it's a toy con. If it's not a toy con, it's a comic con. If it's not comics, it's anime. If it's not anime, it's computer keyboards. Like, they get crazy. And there are all these like small little things that are in there. For us, our convention, we really wanted to just showcase the game. So what we did was we brought a brand new game mode called Gauntlet there. And we wanted people to be able to enjoy our game in a very quick paced setting. And we really wanted people to just kind of feel the experience of presets. So we brought a preset of each of our skill trees, whether it was vitality, utility, or power. And we basically said, go nuts. And it was a fan favorite. So Gauntlet, that was showcased at the convention, will be coming out at the end of this month, early next month. So look forward to the new Gauntlet mode coming out. The convention kind of taught us a couple of things that we knew. We learned that our game is not exactly easy to teach. The tutorial doesn't do enough justice for the game. So whether we need to maybe add more tutorial sections later on, or whether we need to explain stuff more clearly in the tutorial, that's definitely something that we're exploring, because we noticed that like we were also having to like throw in some extra stuff, or they would do the tutorial and then like 4 levels later they'd be really confused, and eventually they'll learn it, but they're not learning as quick as we would like. We don't want to like spoon feed them all the information, but also as well we want to make sure that they're understanding like, hey, what does a generator do? Like, some people didn't even know that. So we were like, yeah, we got to figure out a way to kind of go back in some regard and make our tutorial more understandable and a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's actually, I found it really, really interesting what you mentioned, how the Gauntlet mode was so well liked at the convention that it's going to be brought into the game. That's one thing, as somebody who's been to, the only convention I've been to is PAX East, but I've been for like 8-9 years at this point. That is one thing that I feel is very, very important and attractive when you're demoing at like a big booth like that, surrounded by a lot of other products, is having a good demo and having a good way to like encapsulate the audience and people going by. And you mentioned having to throw in these extra things. I'm a little bit curious, like, how does that necessarily work in terms of the convention, like life cycle or dev cycle, if you will? Like, do you guys have consistently some people down on the floor always exhibitioning it, like showing it off, getting that feedback and just like communicating with like the other half of your team who's up in the hotel room wired in and developing on the go? Or is it kind of like okay, let's take what we learned today, we'll stay up till 2 a.m. redeveloping, and then we'll come back and run it again tomorrow?
Okay. So this is interesting. I think it depends on the venue. For us, we took the whole team and we were like, we don't need anybody back there. Like, everybody come to the convention. It was 4 of us. We had some people that were, didn't want to take the drive. We had some people that were, were doing other things. We're like, okay, no big deal. So it was 4 of us that went. And essentially it was, hey, this is what the plan is. We're just going to develop. I think this is probably about, I'm going to say 6 to 8 weeks before the convention. We were like, all right, we want to develop this for all of our future conventions. We want it to be as basic as possible, give people a choice, go with it. Mm-hmm. Honestly, giving people the choice between the story and the Gauntlet mode, probably not needed. They could have just played Gauntlet and just experienced the game. We could have been like, there's an entire story mode. We're just here to showcase the gameplay. So if you like the feel of it, you'll love the story. That's probably what we should have done. But there's no reason to make another build for it. It's just you end up advertising the Gauntlet mode instead. You just go, hey, click Gauntlet. If something completely catastrophic happens, that's kind of when you have to go back and redo something. But also, like, if it does, you can very easily explain to people, like, hey, like, this is not the build that the game runs on. So, excuse that the game might crash.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Luckily, we didn't have any catastrophic issues. The biggest issue we had was the game froze on one person, and it was because one of our laptops overheated. It wasn't even because the game did anything wrong. It was just the laptop overheated and almost melted part of the plastic. So, we're not gonna talk about that. One of our the actual, like, we have one of those like ergonomic desk things. I have one over in the corner of the room. The actual wood that the laptop was sitting on has warped.
Oh, jeez.
So, it really overheated. Welcome to MSI, everybody, where those things get super hot. I tell everybody, best gaming laptop out there. MSI, please sponsor us. But those things will overheat and will hit 200 degrees. Like you'll burn your hand if you pick one of those things up.
Oh yeah, big time. The gaming laptops out there are like spectacular for doing that. That's like basically how my old laptop went, is it just got to the point where like I'm pretty sure it burned out like its sustainability of its battery, where it could only operate if it was plugged in. So I feel you there. That's really, really, really interesting though, like how like you guys kind of were able to take that feedback from the convention and learn and be able to take that into the future, if you will. Do you guys, I assume you guys plan on exhibitioning at more conventions in the future?
We certainly do.
Nice.
Can't get into too much detail about which ones, but we certainly do plan on being at conventions in the future.
Fair enough.
We need confirmation on our end from the ones that we've applied to before we can, say like, sure, yes, this is where we'll be. Can't say which ones, but we will be at more in the future.
Love that. Yeah, as we've gone to a few ourselves, like I always look for like those kinds of games that are easy to jump into, like learn and pick up, like so you can take it home and actually have like something to play once you get home. So that's really, really cool. That's actually how we found out about your game in the first place. I ran into, I believe your friend, his name was Anthony.
Yep.
Yeah, and I ran into him at a arcade bar, and we just started playing some Smash, and then we were chatting up about PAX East, and then he's like, oh, hey, by the way, my friend makes a game and was also just at this convention. And I'm like, oh, no way. I have a podcast about games. We should chat with him.
Awesome. So Anthony is like the best human being out there. Like, I don't care what anybody says about Anthony. Like he's the best. So story about Anthony. I met Anthony through a friend of mine, and he had introduced me to Anthony. Had never known anything about him. We were just kind of casually playing League of Legends, and that's sort of how we met. And I was just kind of mentioned on the side, like, hey, I'm developing a game, and the whole thing, and we're like looking for people to like QA test, because we need people to run. He's like, oh, I'm interested in QA testing. I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, you just kind of have to like report bugs when you find them and stuff like that, just to sort of like help us out. And I didn't think that 200 playthroughs later that, would be before we released. And I was kind of like, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you doing this? And he just loves our game so much. I was like, really like lenient. I was like, listen, mate, turn on the game for 30 minutes a week. He was like, no, I'm going to turn it on for like 30 hours a week. And like, he would come home from work. He's like, oh, I gotta put on Beat the Machine test. I was like, okay. I was like, you realize like, you don't have to do this. And he's like, I know. I love doing it though. There's a difference. He is definitely not only our best QA tester, he is definitely the person who's, I'm going to say this, he's made the game successful. And for us, he is just so much fun to be around. So he made Beat the Machine Rebooted as its sort of like relaunch. Like he's the reason that like the skill tree works. So like if you ever see him, like tell him, thank you for making the skill tree good. Like, honestly, I will say that as the person who like does all the programming for the skill tree, thank Anthony for why it works, because if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here. Like, seriously.
That's like one of the coolest parts about it, is you just get to like, about this community in general, you get to meet these people who like end up being so integral to your process, and you would have never known it otherwise. Like that, and they create these different kinds of opportunities like this. So shout out Anthony. Thank you for bringing us into contact with our man JT here. Yeah, that's actually really cool. I'll try to like link up with him again at this bar. He was really good at Smash. And so I want to see if he goes to any of those Smash competitions at that bar. It was a fun time.
Yeah, Anthony's a good video game player in general. He plays a lot of stuff really well.
Yeah.
Also, before I forget, I don't want to forget, shout outs to my level designer Jacob, my programmer Zach, my lead VFX Michael, and my artist Morgan, and producer Eric. I want to make sure that all of them get mentioned here. So thank you to all of you for making this game such a success. I don't know what I would do without you. And for all the other names I didn't mention, thank you for you as well for all the input that you've put in. I'm just totally blanking on other people's names right now, so I apologize, but thank you as well.
It's all good.
So I want to make sure I get everybody. As a small indie company, you forget a name like, woo, no. Like,
for sure. Speaking of like your team in general and you guys' development studio, specifically, I want to ask about kind of your development process as it's gone on with the pandemic. It's something nobody likes to talk about, but I'm specifically interested in how it relates to game development, especially when you are a smaller size team, as opposed to, you heard about Nintendo and all these different companies and publishers and developers going completely remote during their times. And gaming, thankfully, was one of the few industries that really boomed during the pandemic. So I'm wondering how that might have affected your team as well.
So we have an interesting pandemic story. So what happened for us was our spring break was actually before COVID happened. So what ends up happening is we all kind of say goodbye to each other on Saturday. We all hug each other goodbye, see you next week, the whole thing. Wednesday is when the country shuts down during our spring break and tells us that, we're not to be in contact with other people. So we're like in the middle of our spring break thinking that we're going to go back to college. Now, some people have their computer equipment at college in their dorm rooms and they've come home for spring break. So now everybody's like scrambling to get all their stuff. I kind of saw the foresight of this happening because I was like, okay, first case, there's already problems. My mom's in the medical field. Mom was kind of like, I don't think this is something that's going to go away. I was like, okay. So she decides, hey, why don't you bring everything home? I was like, okay. I didn't bring everything home, like kitchen appliances and stuff like that, but like all the important electronics, all the consoles came with me.
Oh yeah, the important things.
Which was the smartest decision I ever made because I had everything here. I think I left it like a small television up there and kitchen appliances and clothes and stuff I didn't really need. And I went back for it like 2 weeks later, once the school kind of let us go in, you schedule a time, whatever. But when COVID hit, we only had like 2 months left before we graduated. So for some people, they had checked out. They were like, I don't want to work on this anymore. They were straight up like done. They were like, I don't even feel like coming to the meeting anymore. I was like, all right, it would have been nice to got a message from you to be like, hey, I'm not going to be there. But no, well, we get over it. So some of us just took on the jobs of like 2 or 3 people to make sure that the game released as good as it could. As much as I hate to say that, but as good as it could. And it definitely had its flaws when it came out in July. I don't think there's anything, wrong to say about that. Like our settings menu, some of the buttons didn't work. It happened, we put a patch later, a week later to be like, hey, they work now. Sorry, sorry, you can't change your game from like 1080p to like 720p. We're sorry. But we just didn't have a chance and we didn't test. So things like that happened. Then kind of throughout COVID was sort of interesting too, because then I sort of had to make a decision of like, what do I want to do? Like I have my degree now. Like, am I going to try to go for a real job or am I going to try to make a company? So I was kind of like conflicted between the two. I was kind of torn. So I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for some big jobs. And then I'm also going to like work on my company as well. And then it kind of turned out that like both were sort of giving me responses and like both kind of weren't at the same time. Like you'd apply for a job and then a year and a half later, they'd be like, oh, hey, we're interested in doing an interview. I'm like, it's been 18 months. Like, I don't even know that I don't even know what job I applied
like,
for.
Who are you again?
like what? And then some companies are like 6 months later, like, would you go through like our 3.5 month process to get on our team? And I'm like, yeah, if that's what it takes. Like, what else am I going to do? Am I going to be here? Like, no, I filled out like 8 pages of paperwork to tell you no. Like, what do you mean? So it's so different because every company has their different way of like how to hire people. So during this time, I was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. Because nothing's going on and because there's like a hiring freeze like everywhere in the world, I'm going to continue to work on my game. I'm going to continue to work on my resume. I'm going to continue to work on my portfolio, and I'm going to make this an official business. So that's what I did. And I started to reach out to the original team members that did really good work. I was like, hey, I want you back.
Yeah,
what do I got to do to bring you back? I want to bring you on as like part of the studio now. What do I got to do? What do you want from me? Let's talk this out. And nobody really had any demands. They were kind of just like, no, I loved what we did. Hey, let's get this, let's get this as professional looking as we can.
Oh, that's the best.
And I had about a team of, I want to say it was like 7-ish when we started. And then it kind of grew to like 8 or 9 once you add like the voice actors in. So it was really interesting because we had a point where we were having some voice issues. And we had to develop a new character specifically so that we could fix part of the game to like explain more. The voice of Syncopia was extremely busy because she had kind of landed a new job and was wanting to do more college courses during the pandemic. So she just was completely unavailable to do more voices and stuff. and we're kind of sitting there, and I've got the voice of Pete and the voice of Damon, in call, and they're like, I mean, I guess the two of us could do more voices. I'm like, yeah, but there's a problem. Like, Pete's the garage guy, and you are the main character of the game. Like, it doesn't really make sense.
That's not gonna work.
Like, this isn't gonna work. And I'm like, I'm already the voice of Tom. So what are we gonna do? So we were kind of like sitting for it for a while, and then I kind of brought up to the team. I was like, are any of you like interested in like doing anything? And then we'd run by the voices of like, okay, are you gonna be the new like tutorial person? And like, no, it didn't work. Like nobody had it. So I was kind of messing around one day with the voice actor of Pete, and I was trying to do like Ezreal's voice, but I had was doing it like really projected. Ezreal from League of Legends, by the way, for anybody who might not know. I had done this like really weird voice projection, and he was like, that's it. That's the voice. I was like, no, it's not. I sound like I'm 12. And he's like, no, that's the voice. You got to do that for the game. And that's how Logan came alive. So imagine just for fun doing a voice and being like, no, that's it. That's the voice we need. So I am the voice of both Logan and Tom in the game. So if I ever annoy you, that's why, because I play both of the annoying characters in the game. So yeah,
I will say, after losing like 17 times on one level, like specifically where Logan was telling me about the carrier cubes, I was like, okay, Logan, I never
watch out, that's a splitting node.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
That's just games though, once you play once you hit those like repeating cycles and those repeating lines over and over, like it cements a specific cornerstone like in your mind, where it's just like, oh, this one thing like triggers me beyond all belief. That's awesome that you ended up doing both, because I was talking to Lucas last night about this. We were like trying to decide like, oh, I wonder if the dev team themselves are doing the voice, if they hired other people for specifically voice acting. Like, the voice acting itself, I always find is a super cool part of those projects, like just in general.
Yeah, so the voice of Damon and Pete are completely external. There are people we know, but they do not work specifically on the project other than voice acting, or like, they'll shoot us a message and be like, hey, can I put something on my Instagram? We'll be like, yeah, of course you can. Or, hey, can we help you out anyway? Sure you can. Post this about us, retweet our thing. That's pretty much what, but they're strictly voice acting.
Oh, that's awesome.
But the one line of Logan that the developers specifically get is, I had made an audio error. So I do everything in Wise, which is all of our like organizational stuff for our audio. And I had accidentally linked the same Logan line to all of the ending levels. So in all of the developers' heads are stuck of the line of nice shooting, Pete is a part ready for you back at the garage. Because every time you beat a level, that line specifically. So you'll always hear people be like, nice shooting. And that's just kind of like the meme, like in-house. Oh yeah, that's the one that got us all. If you ever think that like the splitting cube line is a little annoying, wait to hear nice shooting like 30 times in a row.
Yeah, I look forward to diving deeper into this game. It is a lot of fun, to be honest. I'm a big fan of these kinds of like bullet hell, like arcade shooting. Like, played a lot of Enter the Gungeon, so this game was like right up my alley when I first heard about it.
So obviously, we talked about some of the changes, like patches you guys have made. Like, you're still fairly active with this game. And, we did some digging, checked out your website, saw you have some future projects lined up. But we were kind of wondering, in terms of like team management and who's working on what, how do you guys budget your time in terms of like, going to conventions, like working on this game, promoting it, making it better, and then working on, your future stuff?
Well, that's a great question. So we have a team of, I'm going to say it's 7 people. I think that's the most accurate way to describe it. And the team size will be growing. What there is right now is we're going to call it the BTMR team. And then there is the Project Alligator team. And there is overlap. So for instance, myself, I'm on both. Eric is on both. Michael is only on Project Alligator. So we have some people that we designate, you either work on 2 projects or 1 project. There is nobody who works solely on BTMR at this point. Everybody that works on BTMR also works on Project Alligator. So that's how we sort of manage things. what we're trying to do is we want to get BTMRs in basically what we're going to call near perfection state. We are not at near perfection state yet. So we want to make sure that, we're getting this game as polished as possible, but there's also a point where we're like, okay, listen, we can pull back some resources. Right now, it still needs some resources from our side. When you're indie developers, you have to be, as much as I don't like the word, you have to be agile and adapt to new things. Our college was really big on this agile mindset thing, and but you really do have to be agile. It's like the one thing that you actually have to have is that sort of agility to keep going. So for us, we do kind of have to, throw an update at it. We have to keep people sort of interested as well. The great thing about BTMR that kind of does on its own is that it has really good replay value because of the skill tree. So you can beat it once with Vitality utility combo and then go, I'm going to go back with Power utility combo and see if I can beat it. So that kind of does it on its own too. But now for our new project, we really want to be focused on that, really, hone in on what the direction is going to be there. The other projects, we haven't even begun. Those are way in the future. We've sort of predicted just by how long it took the first game. And we said to ourselves, we probably want to make a little bit of easier projects on ourselves, but also because of what we want to do. Can't really get into too much detail on what those projects might be at this time, but in the near future, we may have an announcement. But we just kind of put a timeline out there. So I think it's Barracuda Centipede. I don't think the letter D has one yet, but the Barracuda and Centipede, there is no progress being started on those at this time.
Oh, so, ABC. Okay, yeah. I see.
Yeah, we did it in alphabetical order with animals. I don't know. It's just what I came up with.
Oh, okay. It's just a code word.
Yeah, but it really doesn't mean anything. So okay. Yeah, there's no meaning behind those.
We were like, oh, they must really like animals.
That's a very real game studio move, having the different code names for future projects. That's the best part of it. I think that's one of the coolest things about it. So, okay, cool.
Yeah, it was kind of like one of those things. I was like, I need a code name for something. And I was playing Crash Bandicoot. And I was like, oh, I'll just use animal names in alphabetical order. There we go. And I won't use Bandicoot, so I don't look suspicious. There we go.
Fair enough. Well, this has been a spectacular interview, my friend. And I'm really looking forward to both playing Beat the Machine quite a lot more and also seeing kind of where you guys go as a studio and where you guys develop and keep moving forward. It seems like you've taken quite a lot of inspo from a lot of those PS1 and Sega Genesis classics. Are you going to kind of, not to spoil too much, but are your future projects going to kind of take inspiration from that kind of vein? Really, really retooling some classic ideas and making it your own? If you can't say too much, not trying to pry it out of you.
But... I will give exclusive information. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sweet.
You heard it here first.
We love classics, and the classics are classics because they're classics. I'm going to steal a Lydia Bastianich line from Food Network MasterChef. I'm going to steal her line. Classics are classics because they're classics. Absolutely. And that's just how it is. And you have to learn how to refresh them and make them new so that you get the new generation interested in classics. And
well, hey man,
that's where we're headed.
I think it's working. I think you guys are doing a great job. I think you have a spectacular game on your hands right now. And I look forward to really, really seeing where you guys go in the future and what else you have to add to the space that is gaming, because, I think you've got a real gem on your hands right here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to have this interview with me. I thank you for having me on the show. I also thank you for playing the game. That's just awesome. We love when people play,
Of course, man.
We're getting everything. We just want people to play our games. That's the biggest thing for us.
Of course. And, I'm going to continue trying to play it. I really want to try to be that third person who completes it on nightmare mode. So when I hit that point, I will be letting you know for sure.
Absolutely.
But, in the meantime, as we wrap it up, just want to give you the floor, my friend. Plug your social medias, shout out whatever you want, what you got going on, any future appearances you might have coming up in the near recent future. But the floor is yours, JT. What do you got for us?
What do I got? Oh, I have so much. So first off, Beat the Machine Rebooted on Steam. Go check that out. Go check out our YouTube channel, which is going to be just Beat the Machine on YouTube. Our website is sanguinestudios.games. Our Twitter is Sanguine Studios with an S. And then Instagram is going to be sanguine_studio. Those are going to be the big ones. However, if you can't find those for whatever reason, if you visit the sanguinestudios.games website, just hit our media tab and it'll actually link you to everything. And then you'll have access to our Discord channel and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to get the most up-to-date things, follow our Discord. Our Discord is where we put things first. You'll find out roughly 12 to 24 hours before Instagram and Twitter. So if you really want to be with the up-to-date news, go on the Discord. The Instagram and the Twitter, they generally release at the same time. I think we kind of favor Instagram more, just because it's easier for us to post. YouTube really is just footage. So if you want to see footage of new projects, updates to Beat the Machine, and you want the actual video footage of it, go subscribe to our YouTube. That's what you're going to see on there.
Go check out Beat the Machine, everybody. Lucas, you got any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. I'll just reiterate what you said. This was really cool in terms of just, we haven't talked to like many developers, so to hear that side of things and the trials and tribulations you've gone through with you and your team, and how you've been agile and overcome those things, was just really cool and frankly inspiring. Just starting your own company and really just making moves, making it happen.
Oh yeah.
And hey man, we look forward to hopefully seeing you at PAX East someday.
All right. Yeah, we hope to see you guys at PAX East too. That's kind of our goal. We want to try to get in there. So
absolutely, man.
Whether
Absolutely.
it will be this year or perhaps a different year, we're unsure. But we'll keep people in the loop. So.
Absolutely. And we will as well. But thank you once again. And we hope you have a spectacular rest of your day, JT.
Thank you. You as well. It was nice meeting with both of you.
Alrighty, that was JT. That was, I thought, a very entertaining and hopefully fun to listen to interview for our loyal viewers and patrons.
I certainly thought it was. He had a lot of actually quite insightful things to talk about in terms of like his development process. I really liked hearing about how they operated in a convention setting, because that is one thing, being a veteran of PAX, as you will someday become, Lucas, you begin to see these booths and these people working it, and you're like, geez, this seems like a crazy environment to have to work in. I wonder what that is like. So I thought it was really cool how he sort of dove into that sort of aspect of marketing a game.
Yeah, and even just the coming up with a whole new game mode, like specifically for the convention, is some good initiation insight. But then also, it's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna add it as a new mode to the game.
It's what we talked about even after our own PAX experience this past year. It's like, you got to have a good demo slice. You have to have an experience that is curated for a convention setting where you can roll up with yourself or with 2 or 3 friends and be able to like get a good encapsulation of the game, which it sounds like the gauntlet mode is exactly that. I imagine it's similar to the survival mode in that game, but I appreciated that. I appreciated that they were able to speak on that, because I feel like that's definitely a super overlooked part about the whole convention scene if you're not, actively working it. But yeah, I look forward to working with JT more in the future. I thought it was really, really interesting talking to him, and I think their design like philosophy for their games moving forward leaves me wanting more. Like I'm very excited to see what they do in the future. What are some classics you hope to some classic genres you hope to see that they might bring to life?
I don't know, because I'm not sure if the future ABC projects are going to be kind of similar to this first game in like design, or if like they could just take a totally different like spin on like a different genre of classics, and like I'm not sure what they're gonna go for, which I guess is half the fun in waiting to see what they come up with.
I want to see a reimagining of Mappy done in a steampunk setting.
That is very specific.
Yeah. Not saying I'm giving away $1 million idea to you guys over at Sanguine Studios, but
Oh my god.
Mappy will draw me in even more.
Oh my god. I also like that that he was just like, he had like nightmare mode straight up, like shit's hard.
Hey man, it's can confirm it's tough.
I know, but why? Like, I was like, why would you
me.
start? Yeah,
You
but
know
you're playing it to get a like feel for the game and like, you know, kind of experience it, and you're diving into like only two people, Tom, have ever accomplished what you're hoping to accomplish.
There's no better way to get a feeling of a game and understanding of gameplay than playing it in its peak state.
That's not its peak state.
The most
that's
difficult
designed
state you can play it in.
He said you have to have a knowledge of the skills in order to effectively.
Yeah, I did not get a lot of skills because I did not get too far. But yeah, I look forward to jumping back in and playing. Definitely check it out, guys. Beat the Machine Rebooted on Steam. I played it with controller. Apparently, a lot of people play it with keyboard mouse. You might be insane if you do that, but definitely was doable with controller. If you like games like Binding of Isaac, if you like games like Enter the Gungeon, if you like games like Galaga or Space Invaders, this is a game you will enjoy. This is a game for you. If anything, to hear the Logan character, he is easily the most distinct character in the game. I found his lines like quite funny after I got past the point where I was dying over and over again. So definitely come check this game out. It's a good time, very strong cyberpunky vibes to it. And yeah, I got nothing but good things to say.
Well, there you go. That is Tom's review on Beat the Machine Rebooted, and check it out for yourself. And like we said, we hope to do more content with JT in the future, and yeah, just give it a shot, everybody. It's a good time.
Make sure to give him a follow on Instagram, Twitter, subscribe to him on YouTube. We'll pop all those channels up for you guys. And then after you do that, make sure you subscribe to this channel that you're watching this interview and this podcast on, because we got a ton of great interviews coming your way this season. Season 3 is shaping up to be a real strong one. We're going to be the formative gaming industry podcast. We'll beat out all the big dogs. All the people you want to hear about are going to be on this show and no other shows. We're going to get those exclusives, those behind the curtains look, like those world premieres. We're going to steal the world premiere thing from Jeff Keighley. Really embody it here at Game Chat, won't we, Lucas? Jeff Keighley's got another fucking thing coming.
Sure. Thanks for listening and watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.